Hello, my name is Janae Whitted. Today I'm going to talk to you about how respectability politics are ineffective in challenging racism. Have you ever been told to embrace the cultural norms of a dominant culture in order to fit into your community? Or have you been judged for not acting similar to those of a dominant culture? If you have, then you may be experiencing the idea of respectability politics. Respectability politics is the idea of minority groups attempting to urge younger generations to follow the values of the dominant culture, rather than challenging the dominant culture to accept different cultural backgrounds. Now, some may think that assimilation will lead to better cohesion among diverse ethnic groups and eliminate racism. However, that is simply not the case. Respectability politics are ineffective in challenging racism because they force minorities to adapt to oppressive change, refuse to acknowledge the struggles of minorities in current society, and eradicate cultural values to fit a mold. Respectability politics are ineffective in challenging racism, again, because they force minorities to adapt to oppressive change. For example, Brent Staples recalls in his essay, Just Walk On By, that on an evening walk in a nearby park, he noticed how a young white woman perceived him to be dangerous. He also recalls that he realized he wielded the ability to increase tension just by the woman's perception. Then Staples reflects on how the woman believed that he was a dangerous criminal, when in fact he just wanted to clear his current insomnia. Staples also recalls that being perceived as dangerous is hazardous itself. As one cannot alter their physical appearance, simply appearing to be suspicious tends to cause paranoia and fear. Staples also mentions how fear and weapons tend to meet in urban America, which leaves the threat of death constantly hanging over his head. While the amounts of deaths from racial profiling have risen over the years, it is a recurring problem in American society, even more so in major cities. Staples states in Norman Potter's 1963 essay, My Negro Problem and Ours, how Potterhertz recalled being frightened by black males as they were physically stronger than most white males, and how even as an adult living in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, he is still apprehensive of seeing black men on the street. Unfortunately, Potterhertz's way of thinking led to more radical works on how to deal with the problem of the black man. Novelist Edward Hoagland alludes to simple panhandlers being muggers working up the nerve to try nefarious acts. This way of thinking increases the level of fear faced by both sides of the racial profiling scale and demonstrates how fear continues to spread and form stereotypes from oppressive change. For minorities, confirmation is a way of survival. Respectability politics are ineffective in challenging racism because they lead to blatant ignorance of minority struggle from the dominant culture. For example, in Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, she analyzes how the incarcerated, made up mostly by minorities, have little rights because of their transition into becoming the new victims of the new Jim Crow, which would be the American justice system. Alexander defines that the American ideal of being colorblind, of which the justice system is based on, relates to race not being viewed in favor of looking at a person as a whole. This train of thought helps to further the idea of the incarcerated being America's new whipping boys, as in American society, being viewed as a criminal enables the idea of creating an individual or group of individuals as less than human. Due to this treatment, many incarcerated people lose their basic rights, such as the right to federally funded health care, food assistance, public housing, and education assistance. However, many overlook why there are so many incarcerated felons. Alexander mentions that many minorities are driven into the criminal justice system by police drug operations. While these operations majorly take place in poor communities of color, there are no measures put in place to check the validation or to check if the police have the right to stop, interrogate, and search these civilians. This often leads to racial biases becoming acceptable means of validation. as the police can stop, interrogate, and search anyone as long as the individual consents. Once arrested, the incarcerated felon is denied significant legal representation and is pressured to plead guilty. Alexander also mentions how this is furthered by prosecutors who add extra charges, as their decisions cannot be tried for racial bias. The ignorance of how the criminal justice system is set to capture and detain minorities demonstrates the elaborate trap from which they cannot escape. Respectability politics are ineffective in challenging racism because they lead to the eradication of cultural values in order to force minorities into cultural molds. For example, in Roxane Gay's book, Bad Feminist Essays, Gay analyzes the double standards and unrealistic changes African Americans face daily. One such double standard is the authenticity of one's blackness regarding an individual's behavior. If an African American's behavior differs from the norm, they are observed differently. Also, Gay analyzes how individuals like Oprah Winfrey, Don Lemon, and Bill Cosby have risen to popularity and are idolized by the African American community, yet still face backlash in their careers. This backlash can be both literal and figurative, as their rise to success causes them to lose sight of their black characteristics. Gay mentions that the suggestions of fitting into the mold of respectability politics from such important figures in the African American community are well intended. However, these suggestions overlook the ways that the educational, social welfare, and criminal justice systems reinforce the transgressions that the black community faces. While there may be success stories of influential figures that follow respectability politics, there is no official guarantee of respectability politics ridding society of racism. Gay also mentions how that while the prospect of a world in which racism is abolished is desirable, blacks should not have to imitate their oppressors to end oppression. The idea of respectability politics will continue to influence contrasting ideas on how to handle the issue of racism/ethnocentrism. However, they will continue to maintain no respect for minority cultures. Now, for those who may believe that respectability politics are effective in combating racism and ethnocentrism, you have a point, because Staples also recalls being barely noticed to gang warfare, street murders in his community because he was classified as one of the good boys. After observing how being tough or having a abrasive appearance portrayed with a minority being arrested or winding up deceased, Staples chose to remain in the background for survival. And while he did demonstrate conformity to the ideals of respectability politics by making himself seem as unimposing as possible, he also demonstrated his desire to conform. Even without classifying himself as one of the good boys, due to him staying out of most altercations, he still had to adopt respectability politics to survive. So he was forced to conform due to trying to stay away from racial profiling. Respectability politics will continue to challenge minority backgrounds through racial profiling, injustice in the criminal justice system, and the implementation of double standards or unrealistic changes. However, respectability politics can be combated through the acceptance of minority culture within the dominant cultures and minority communities. No one can truly be perfect, and imitating a falsified idea of perfection only hinders how society can continue to learn and grow. If society accepts that difference is a part of life and works towards embracing different cultures, then maybe racism can finally be abolished. Thank you, and enjoy having a wonderful day today.